This week on A Lively Experiment, the future of the Pawtucket soccer stadium is in doubt after one of its public partners puts its financing on hold. And the number of candidates hoping to replace Congressman Cicilline grows.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by...
Hi, I'm John Hazen-White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.
Joining us on the panel, Emily Lynch, political science professor at the University of Rhode Island. Bill Bartholomew, founder of the Bartholomewtown Podcast. And Providence Journal State House reporter, Patrick Anderson. Hello and welcome to Lively. I'm Jim Hummel. It is great to be back with you again. The city of Pawtucket hit the pause button this week on its portion of a public financing package for Tidewater Landing, putting the future of a project that includes a signature 10,000-seat soccer stadium in question. Financial instability and steep interest rates increases have made an already narrow margin for borrowing even more challenging. Patrick, let me begin with you. You had a story that hit this morning. We're taping on a Friday morning that this may just be the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, it's happening everywhere across the country, and the financial conditions with interest rates rising just makes it really difficult to finance big projects. And it's hitting on multiple levels. Interest rates are going up, but also construction costs have gone up. And with Silicon Valley Bank's collapse, lending is tightening as you have banks getting skittish and they're being watched by depositors. And so they're pulling back. And if you're something like the developers of the Pawtucket soccer stadium, your numbers to make your project work are getting more difficult. And basically what's happening there is they need a loan to finance part of that project. They've got help from the state. They're putting a lot of investor money in, but part of the package to pay for a $120+ million stadium is getting a bank loan. And right now, either the bank won't make that loan or the interest rates are exorbitant. And so that hasn't closed. And so the state and the city, which are also committed to putting some financing in, don't want to put tax dollars and commit tax dollars into something that they know doesn't have enough financing to actually be completed.
So the public money comes in on the back end?
It'll come in at the same time. There's a public loan that the city and the state want to close at exactly the same day as the private bank loan, and they're just waiting for that private piece to come in. And so that's kind of the logjam that's holding things up. In the meantime, the developer has spent around, they say, $25 million, and is in
the ground.
Yeah, is putting it. There's concrete in the ground. They've put in a foundation. The question is just how long can they go? If they don't get this financing, at some point they will run out of that cash, and then what happens?
Well, this was one of the fears all along. You get into the project, and then maybe the financing is tenuous enough that it might be a problem.
Right, and I think the mayor made a good decision to halt it at this point in the interest of the taxpayers. And we see this happening not only with construction jobs, but also even at the local level, in the personal level, family level, where making decisions right now are tough with an increase in the interest rate of making decisions of buying cars or buying a home.
Bill?
I completely agree. It's that fiscal conservatism that is sometimes, people roll their eyes, but you've got to make those tough decisions, whether it's on the personal level or the macro level. I spoke with Mark Blythe this week, the renowned economist from Brown University, basically on the banking situation. And yes, Silicon Valley Bank is certainly in its own silo, but the contagion, if you will, that would come from that is just, as Patrick described, a tightening of lending and additional scrutiny around the banking sector. That is just part of the pie of economic downturns, if you will, that are, probably going to put this stadium on pause. In fact, Speaker Shekarchi yesterday told Dan York on his television show that the stadium project is paused. So you heard it from the man.
But Governor McKee and Mayor Grebian gave it the dreaded, endorsement, basically saying, yeah, it's going full steam ahead. We talked about other things, though. The Superman building, and you've got a couple of high schools, right, in Warwick and Pawtucket. How does this affect those?
Everything's going to be more difficult to do. There are going to be some cost-benefit questions going on at city councils, as well as in boardrooms and those kind of places. I mean, basically, if you just passed a bond, if you're a voter who just approved a school project or a multi-school project, you're probably looking at the amount of money you approved to spend not going quite as far. Maybe it pays for one less school or a smaller school, something like that. And then you've just got the larger projects, like there's the Metacomet one in East Providence, stuff like that. We don't know what's happening with that. The economics don't work quite as well for all of those projects. So do they get scaled back? Are they a little smaller? Do they wait? Are things going to get, if they wait, are they going to get better or worse? I mean, right now we're in that cycle where, because there's inflation and it's persistent, the Fed keeps raising rates and trying to slow things down. But that is right now is just in kind of a cycle that's really hitting real estate and construction in particular.
Just finally on this, Bill, former soccer referee, you've hung up your cleats, right?
My cleats are hung up.
Too many crazy parents, right?
Way too many crazy parents. I think it's a major problem. I did referee in the USL, the league that's coming to Tidewater.
But let's say in a perfect world this does go through, they figure it out somehow. And how have you felt about this project overall? Do you think there's enough public support and people putting money into tickets to be able to make it go?
Well, I think if we were being completely honest about it, I think it's an uphill battle. Look, you've got legacy programs like Providence College basketball, URI basketball that aren't full stadiums or arenas all the time unless you have an excellent season happening. There's no tradition, it's so on and so forth. But the project as a whole with the A and the B side, I think that in league with other ideas around the Blackstone Valley, it can be an effective activity. Is it going to be a sold-out stadium with people waving the yellow flags and crying, when whoever scores the first goal for FC Rhode Island? Will we see FC Rhode Island tattoos and, people upset when, the team loses or anybody caring about the team? I don't know. Maybe.
All right, we shall see. Folks, get out your scorecard in the CD1 race. Since we were last with you, we've had two major announcements of people who are not running. Helena Folks, who ran for governor, and House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Since then, we've had a pile of people, and we'll talk about that. We can list them as we go along. Emily, as you look at this race, to me, it's interesting that Folks and Shekarchi, who had the most money and the most name recognition, are not. So how does that affect the race?
Right. I think it opens it up for other potential candidates where we see that Sabina Matos, as well as Sandra Cano, have put in their names quite recently, and others as well. But I think, we were kind of waiting to see if Folks has a lot of money, right, to put into, or at least she did in the governor's race. So I think that definitely has changed kind of the race.
And this is a race, though, from a political science standpoint. It's a short window. You don't need a ton of money, probably not a lot of outside money, and you could win. You don't need 50% to get to beyond the primary.
Right, exactly. So, I think that leads to some discussions as to maybe some election reforms because of that, because we may have a tight or a pretty large field within the Democratic Party for that primary.
So, name recognition and money at this point. Sabina Matos has the name recognition, but I'm not sure up and down. How would she play on Aquidneck Island?
Right. How many people can tell you who the lieutenant governor of Rhode Island is if you went out to somewhere on Memorial Boulevard in Newport and asked that question? Probably not that many. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's going to be a tight election. I think with the speaker stepping out, with Helena Bonanno Folks likely deciding, hey, look, I don't want to take a chance of losing a second major election in less than a year. I honestly think you get into a situation where you have Sabina Matos versus Don Grebian as your headline over the course of the summer with a...
You think Grebian's in?
Oh, why? I think so for sure. I really do, especially with everything going on in Pawtucket.
Would they still let him come back and cut the ribbon if he's the congressman?
I think they
if
would.
It goes through?
Absolutely. But there's another candidate that is looming, so to speak, and that's Gabe Amo, who comes from the Raimondo administration, now in the Biden White House. Look, very well connected at the state level, the municipal level, the federal level. The big difference between him and the politicians, or I should say elected officials, is that if you lose that race and you're Sabina Matos or you're Don Grebian, you get to go back to your job the next day. You still get to be lieutenant governor. You still get to be mayor. For someone like a Gabe Amo or anybody else in the private sector, you basically have to give up your job, and then who knows what happens if you don't win.
But how does he play in Portsmouth? I mean, we know who he is. There's some people who have no idea, and in a short race with name recognition, that's a heavy lift for somebody like Gabe Amo.
Well, the key for him is that he has connections in Washington and can probably raise a pile of money. I mean, that's speculative because he's never run, but knowing that he comes out of the Raimondo school and has all kinds of connections in the White House, I think it's probably safe to say. So his name recognition would come by advertising. Kind of like Helena folks last year, I don't think her name recognition was very high at all going into it. And after a lot of ads over the course of the summer, it was pretty decent, and she got very close to taking down the governor. But I think, to Bill's point, the field just is not set yet. I think, probably while I'm speaking, someone else is announcing, and so we just don't know.
When do you think it's going to shake out? April, May?
I think by then. I think the next couple of weeks are just going to see more candidates and some of those big decisions, like Gabe. I mean, it's a big decision for him to make. He's in a good place now, and he'd have to give that up. But there are other candidates. You can have candidates from the private sector who might not have to give up as much, who could come in and might be privately wealthy. There are folks like Liz Parrick out there. So I think until we know kind of how the lanes are set, it's really hard to forecast.
Go ahead.
I would just like to add that we're talking about name recognition, and when we look at the list so far, it's Lieutenant Governor Matos who has won a statewide election. So people are more familiar with her in certain areas, right, across the state. And we can look back to Bob Wagand, went from lieutenant governor to being a U.S. rep in the late 90s. So I think that that Matos does have that advantage.
What do you make of, so Sabina Matos is in, Senator Cano, and Maria Rivera is talking about potentially in CF. So you have three Latina candidates, and I wonder whether that's kind of a strength in numbers or whether that splits the vote.
Right. So the response, which we've heard in the media, is, well, is that being discussed for men? In why is there a focus of three Latinas?
Because it's apples and oranges, in my mind.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. What do you think? Is it not?
I think that we could look at the group, and I don't know if it's necessarily. Yeah, it's definitely, you're going to split the vote with multiple candidates.
I guess the way I see it is there are plenty of white guys in Congress, and if you put up a bunch of white guys there, I mean that's kind of what stands out here is you have three good Latina candidates, and that's a novelty. So, and Sabina Matos has said, we need to have more diversity in Congress. I would be the first Latina. Well, so then why isn't Sandra Cano or Maria Rivera equally qualified if you're looking just for the diversity?
Right.
I mean, there's vote splitting with everyone, especially with a field this big. The thing that each candidate needs to do, no matter who they are, is differentiate themselves. Is get that name recognition and then claim a section of the electorate that's yours and give people a reason to vote for you. And that's what all of the candidates are going to do, are going to be faced with something this crowded. We don't have anyone really from the left entered yet. That's another thing that is probably going to happen. Someone will probably jump in who's more of a true progressive. How does that change things? So all of that is going to shape how this race plays out.
Totally agree. Disorganization, the so-called progressive civil war manifesting right now, an inability to rally around a single candidate that has a pathway to victory that can tap into the mainstream, but something else to watch as well. And it was funny because there was a photo that I zoomed in on from the Providence St. Patrick's Day parade where Governor McKee is in the middle of this portion of the photo. To his right, Mayor Grebian. To his left, Sabina Matos. Where does the governor land? Not necessarily out in public, but behind the scenes. His lieutenant governor, who he handpicked and basically ran a campaign with, despite some tension, or the Northern Rhode Island mayoral peer group portion of the political scene, which would feature Don Grebian. Where does he land? That's a big thing as well.
Yeah. And the other thing is money. You don't have to spend a pile of money, right? It's on a pretty short. There were millions of dollars that came in the CD too. You could get out probably with under $1 million. What do you think?
Potentially.
Maybe?
Depending on who you are. If you have name recognition, you don't have to spend as much. If you don't, you might have to spend a lot of money because no one knows you.
And then finally, will there be a Republican candidate? That's a question. I don't know. Do you think?
I think there will, but they're not lining up and jumping it. It's kind of seen as a chore at the moment.
And Alan Waters became a Democrat, right?
You got that Alan Waters. Is he from Massachusetts? Is he from Rhode Island? Is he running for Senate? Is he running for rep? Who is he? What is he? And why is he involved? He won't even qualify for the debates.
All right.
I think Bill made a good point about Governor McKee. Who is he going to support, and where are these endorsements? Who are we going to see? I think that's going to be powerful for this race. Who are which unions are going to support which candidate? We should pay attention to that.
Well, and I also wonder, would he sit out? Would Governor McKee say, well, maybe I don't want? Because what if he does not endorse Sabina Matos, and then he has to be in those meetings if she doesn't win the other 4 years? A little awkward, right?
Well, you can just do what Gina did with him.
Yeah,
lose his phone number.
Yeah,
problem solved.
All right, a coalition of environmental groups is trying to get some momentum for a so-called bottle bill that would be putting a deposit down on every can or glass or whatever you buy, beverage. They're trying to clean up the environment. I talked with Jed Thorpe, who is the Rhode Island Director for Clean Water Action this week. He told me a little bit about what they're trying to do up at the State House. Here's part of our interview.
Bottle bills have met with varied levels of success. None have passed since I've been here. What makes you optimistic this year?
Yeah, good question. So I think we're at a point now where legislators recognize that the plastic pollution problem, beverage container pollution, only continues to get worse. We have data from the past, 30, 40 years from shoreline cleanups and volunteer cleanups that show pretty clearly that what we've been doing isn't working. We gotta do better. We gotta do things differently. Because when you capture containers, like you do in a beverage container recycling system, they're much more likely to actually be turned into new bottles, as opposed to right now, things that you put in the single stream system. A lot of those containers aren't actually recycled. And so we got to do better on recycling as well. And again, a bottle bill addresses both of those problems. I think the things that are really important are having a 10-cent deposit fee versus, say, a 5-cent deposit. The data is pretty clear that the states like Michigan and Oregon that have the 10-cent fee have much higher redemption rates.
10 cents across the board for everything?
Yeah, 10 cents.
Including NIPS?
Including the NIPS. So the NIPS would be included in this bill, which we think is really important.
But NIPS have been a big deal the last couple of years.
There's been a lot of attention paid to them. They're problematic because they're small enough that they can slip down into the storm drains, which then create a maintenance problem for municipal staff who have to go in there and clean these things out. And they can't be effectively recycled out in Johnston at the materials resource facility.
As you know, it's always what juice you have up at the State House.
I think support is building, and so we're optimistic that this is the year that we can figure it out and finally, crack that nut here in Rhode Island and actually get a bottle bill done.
You can watch our entire conversation with Jed Thorpe of Clean Water Action on Rhode Island PBS YouTube page. Bill, let me begin with you. There's only so much bandwidth up at the State House, and while this sounds good, we got affordable housing flying, we got the budget and everything else. He says that he's starting to meet with the state leaders, but I wonder whether we have the stomach for a bottle bill this year.
What does that coalition really look with? You know, for me, my first engagement with Rhode Island politics was when I was like 6 or 7 years old, getting a certificate from now Council 4 President, then Town of Charlestown Council President Mike Downey for picking up garbage off of the road in Charlestown. You know, so my whole life I've seen the disgusting behavior that people engage in of throwing litter into waterways on the streets. I think it's a terrible thing. I think it's an embarrassing thing. At the same time, you know, would people gather their bottles and bring them to wherever they got to deposit them to get, you know, $1.80 every month or whatever it is? You know, I'm not sure. It's just, I think it's more of a commentary at this point of, you know, take a look around and ask yourself, you know, what kind of world do you want to live in? A world...
Did you try to get on Lively Experiment when you were 6? You sound like you were very politically active.
I believe
then.
I maybe I should have been on the old carpeted set back in the day. You know?
That would have been great, the semicircle. What about the bottle bill?
Well, if I believe at Governor McKee's inauguration, he talked about litter, right? That was something he discussed. We see Mayor Smiley talking about kind of these practical politics, like of keeping our roadways clear, clean. We can also consider like the blue economy as a big push in Rhode Island. This is cleaning up our waterways. This is a big part of that. I don't know if it's going to gain traction this year in the General Assembly, but I think we'll continue to see this come up, and maybe we'll see some change in the future.
Yeah, I think the bottle bill is a tough one because it involves money. It's a big lift. The things that they've been more interested in that play better or easier up at the State House are things like mandates that you don't have to pay for and aren't enforced. Remember, we have a straw ban. You've probably gotten a plastic straw in the last couple of days.
Without even asking for it.
Without even asking.
Right?
So stuff like that, they much prefer things like that are very light touch. But the only thing I'll say is there is some pressure on NIPS. They have talked a lot about doing something about NIPS and will face a credibility gap if they do nothing about NIPS this year.
That's David Bennett's big deal. He had tried to do that. I wonder, though, so from a practical standpoint, the money flow here is the reason the beverage industry has been so against this is they have to put up 3.5 cents per can. And so that's where the beverage industry has always had a pretty heavy lobby. But I was thinking about this practically. One man's trash is another man's treasure. So if you have even if I don't want to pick it up or do the 180, maybe you have people taking that, collecting, going, 500 bottles or whatever. If you don't want to put the deposit back, maybe somebody picks that up on the side of the road. What do you think about that?
Right. I think that's a great idea. And you could see maybe Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts making that a project.
For a fundraiser, right?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that's the route.
It's also, you bring up a great point, which I ignored completely in thinking about this. It's an industry in New York City, and people work very, very hard going to recycling bins, picking up litter, and it does incentivize sort of a DIY small business to go collect these bottles. So, I think that with taking that in consideration, there may be more of a practical nature to it. I still don't think it gets through this year, though.
I also wonder practically, Patrick, is that, so I put out my cans. Is somebody going to be rifling through my recycle bin, right? If I'm not returning them and that's fine if, once it hits the curb. But then there's also the amount that Resource Recovery is going to sell that on the market. So there seems to be a downstream economic impact that I'm not sure everybody's fully looking at.
Yeah, well, and if you're looking at it just at a political perspective, and you mentioned people going through your trash, do politicians want folks with the shopping carts full of, or even larger, full of cans, pushing them down the street? They might think that's a bad look. I know some people do in New York and not want that.
Even in New York, Bill, right?
Even in New York.
So yeah, even that, there are two sides to it. If you're a politician looking for votes.
All right, let's go to outrages and/or kudos. The show is moving quickly. Professor Lynch, let's begin with you this week.
Yeah, I would like to say a kudo to Senator Jack Reed for securing a new center for NOAA Newport, bringing it from Virginia to Newport, from Virginia to Rhode Island, and bringing new jobs to the state.
That's a big deal, right?
It is.
And was that in question because they're bringing they're moving it away from Virginia? Is it a creation of a new site? Do you know?
Yep. So it's moving from Norfolk, Virginia, to Newport, to the, I believe, the naval.
There's always been that. There's always been that competition a little bit with Newport News, right? So,
right.
One for Rhode Islanders. What do you have, Bill?
Sometimes you get a window into the problems that we have and the way a certain person thinks. We had a great example of this last week where Scituate Republican Bobby Quattrocchi asked Rebecca Kislak, Representative Kislak, if she was a pedophile in a conversation on an equity bill. You got to watch the tape to get the full context. But, what was even more embarrassing was the ensuing, lack of an authentic apology in the moment and subsequently across the media from Quattrocchi. And then, not to be outdone, Minority Leader Mike Chippendale produced what has to be, to his credit, something that he believes is equivalent to the Declaration of Independence, and you can almost picture him with a tri-cornered hat standing on top of some hill out in Foster, Gloucester, screaming this to the wind, condemning Joe Shekarchi for removing Quattrocchi from that committee that he said that ridiculous comment on, that it sets a dangerous precedent. And what it shows you? It shows you the Republican Party in Rhode Island is a disorganized, basically non-existent, irrelevant group of, unfortunately, mostly people who appear on the surface to just be complete fools at this point.
It's almost like the old Ed Dupree back in the late 80s. I'm dating myself. He ran a commercial in one of his campaigns. I'm sorry if you're offended. Almost like it's your fault, right? If you're offended, well, then I'll offer up an apology.
It really is too bad. I've talked about this extensively before. The state needs a bipartisan, and I mean that as in two-party system at play. And there are good people who are Republicans in Rhode Island. There really are. And they should be out in front instead of the complete and utter nonsense that we've seen over the last week.
Great. Patrick, you get the last minute.
I will follow up with a micro-outrage, courtesy of my colleague.
Micro-outrage,
yes,
I like that.
Courtesy of my colleague, Kathy Gregg, who reports that at the state library at the State House, the media is no longer allowed to directly communicate with and get information from the state librarian. State librarian who are great, who are awesome, and help us out a lot. We now have to go through the Secretary of State's public relations apparatus to transfer the information, the records of history to the media. And I don't think that's a good idea.
Any reason given for that?
No. I think that's just the way that modern comm shops operate.
Yeah.
In these days.
Well, and the librarians are always Switzerland. They don't want to be in the middle of any of this, right? They just want to give you the information.
They are not
right?
dropping hot takes no matter what we ask.
Yeah. What do you think about this? I don't know. So, all right. That is good, folks. It is a quick half hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Bill, good to see you. Emily and Patrick. Folks, join us back here next week. We are in the heart of the legislative session, and you never know who's going to announce for CD1 over the next week, but we will have it covered. Join us back here next week as the lively experiment continues.
A Lively Experiment is generously underwritten by.
Hi, I'm John Hazen White Jr. For over 30 years, A Lively Experiment has provided insight and analysis of the political issues that face Rhode Islanders. I'm a proud supporter of this great program and Rhode Island PBS.